One, and we are recording episode 379. The last one up on YouTube is 372. For everybody listening, it's Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021 at 1:11 p.m. Eastern time. I was suspended for a week on YouTube starting on Saturday for talking about election fraud, which I was unaware is hate speech. But, I guess every day you learn something new. But all those episodes are up on Rumble and BitChute, and that is what it is. But how would you introduce yourself? Ms. Cox? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, sorry. I said,
I'm here.
how about you introduce yourself?
Okay, I'm here. Yep, thanks. So my name is Bobby Ann, and I'm an attorney, and I, like you, Tommy, have an online channel, which YouTube, like you, Tommy, is taking down my videos and censoring me as well. So I feel your frustration. But thank you for having me on the show today. It's great.
Absolutely.
I'm
Yeah,
excited to talk to you.
absolutely. And her show is All Things Lawyer. I'll put that link in the description and sticking in the top comment. Definitely go check it out because you definitely talk about things that you can't discuss on YouTube, which for me, it's this weird back and forth in my mind because on one hand, I mean, I truly despise not just government intervention, but anyone telling me what to do.
Right.
Just period. I mean, private Catholic high school, I wasn't allowed to have hair over my ears, so
That's right.
naturally I had long hair. And as soon as I got to college and no one was telling me how I had to have my hair, I cut it short, and it's been that way for 12 years. So when I look at, something like big tech,
Mhm.
part of me is like, I have to stay true to what I believe in, and I think they're private companies. On the other hand, you can't be protected by Section 230, but still act as a publisher.
That's
And
right.
could you just clarify that for people listening what Section 230 is? Because I up until now I've been in they're private companies. I hate it. They're dirty communists, but they're private companies. I honestly didn't know what Section 230 was until yesterday. I'd heard it, but I never actually learned it until your channel.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I did a show on it because it was a hot topic. You know, everybody was throwing Section 230, everybody's talking about it. A lot of people weren't clear on, what exactly it is, what it says. So I did a show on it where I actually broke it down and I covered three specific provisions of Section 230. So it's called Section 230 because it's part of a larger law. It's a federal law, and basically, you are not. It was written in 1996, the law, so you are not really supposed to look at a law and try to interpret it and apply it in real life situations unless you look at the intent of the law. So what happened with Section 230 is it was written in 1996 when the internet was a fledgling industry. It was really, really at its beginning. I mean, I don't know, you might be too young, but I
Yeah.
remember trying to go online and it was a dial up
Yeah.
and you literally heard like the phone dialing, right? And
Yeah.
it took a long time. It took several minutes to load a page,
Yeah.
of the internet onto your computer. So that's when this was written, right? There was
Okay.
no Facebook, there was no Google, there was no nothing really, right? There was no Instagram, there was no Gab, Parler, like all these things didn't exist
Yeah.
back in 1996 when they wrote the law. So it's been misapplied and it's been twisted and it's being used in a way that it was never intended to be used because the legislators that wrote the law didn't imagine that 10 years down the line or 15 years down the line there would be these social media platforms that really was not in if you look at the legislative history that's not in there.
Mhm.
So it's very specific. It basically was trying to protect companies that were going to try to expand the internet, make it something bigger than it was. Again, it was a fledgling industry. The government wanted it to flourish. So they were trying to not be too strict on how this law was interpreted in the sense of really, they didn't want to regulate the industry, but they wanted to give some guidance because they didn't want whoever the company was that was the platform, they didn't want them to be held liable and get sued and then be sued out of existence for people that would use it and might say something that was inappropriate, illegal, eliciting some sort of an illegal act. So it really is meant for open platforms that allow the users, you and me, we would be users, to edit the information that they want to put out there. It's not meant for the platform itself to edit the information that's put out there, right? Because as soon as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whomever starts to edit something that you, so if you post, let's take a real life example. You post your YouTube video, you spoke about election fraud in it, YouTube got annoyed, so they took it down. So as soon as they're taking it down, they're editing.
Mhm.
It's like a newspaper, right?
Mhm.
It's like the newspaper editor saying, well, you know what? I don't like this story, so I'm going to throw it in the back of the newspaper. I'm going to bury it so people don't really see it. Meanwhile, I love this story. I'm going to put it on the front page.
Which is, if I can interject, which is fine for a private company that doesn't have the protection of
Right.
Section 230. You can't
Right.
have your cake and eat it too.
Exactly.
If that's what they
Exactly.
wanna do, if that's what they wanna do, that's fine, and for me, that's, I think, the misunderstanding, at least I had beforehand, was like, like, I like Trump, I'm right-leaning, but I do, like I said earlier, I'm like, they're a private company. I didn't know that distinction where it's like, you can be that private company. You can, you know but just like my podcast, I choose to have you on. I edit who I want to have on beforehand. And if at any
Right.
point I don't want someone's episode up, I'll give it the axe. That's fine. I'm not protected by Section 230,
Right.
right? Okay,
Right.
sorry. Back to you. Sorry.
Yep. No, you've got it. And you know, a newspaper. So media outlets are newspaper, television, radio have controls, which again, I'm like you. I don't think government should have their hand in everything. I don't think everyday lives of Americans should be governed by what, the legislators want.
Mhm.
I agree with you, but we do need some sort of safety precautions. So, for example, there's another federal law, the Communications Act. It's from the 1920s, 1930s, and it's specific. This one provision specifically says you, meaning a television station, a radio station, can't prohibit a political candidate from having their advertisements on air. They have to give equal time. So if you're running for office and your opponent is up against you, you both get the same amount of time. If they sell you 5 minutes every day, they have to sell the other guy 5 minutes every day if the other guy wants it, right? So that is because they didn't want, when radio first came out, they realized how powerful radio was going to be. And they didn't want the airwaves to only cover one candidate. So if the owner of a radio station really liked whatever candidate, they could say, oh, great, I'm going to sell you all my airtime or 90% of my airtime. And I'm only going to sell your opponent 10%. That way you get more exposure. More people are going to vote for you. The government didn't want the owners or managers of these radio stations to be able to have that kind of control. Now, there's no law that says social media has to follow the same precautions and the same rules. So, as we saw with this election last year, 2020, it was so obvious that, for example, you'd read stories that Facebook would take down ads that President Trump was trying to run on Facebook, but would allow all these Biden
Yeah.
commercials or advertisements or whatever on the platform. So, I mean, it doesn't even make logical sense. How could you be prohibiting that from happening with radios and televisions, but you're not doing it with social media, which is now probably, especially for millennials, the biggest way to get information today. A
Yeah.
lot of people don't necessarily sit down and watch the television anymore.
Yeah.
So,
I'm 30. I don't think I've the last time I, like, regularly watched TV was, like, 2009, and, like,
right.
I'm not even, like, a baby boomer, like, I'm 30, like,
Yep.
it is now let's just play devil's advocate. So when we look at something like, you know, like I remember like Trump talked about it a lot in like I think it was 2016. But they're like, "You're a billionaire and you didn't pay all this," and he was like, I'm taking the same loopholes that exist, that other, don't hate the player, hate the game," kind of. It's like, if you don't want him
Right.
there, it's kinda what he would say against Biden. He'd be like, "You've been there for 47 how come you haven't closed those loopholes?"
Right.
Let's just play devil's advocate. Are they just using existing loopholes, and can we fault private companies whose bottom line is profit? You could argue that there's political capital that doesn't have a monetary value. Are they just using existing loopholes, and can we really fault the dog for going after the car when it's
Right.
like the loophole's there? Like, should we close it? And then obviously that brings up the whole, well, yes, that's what we're trying to do.
Well, that's a great point. I mean, a lot of people I think would automatically say, "Yeah, no, I mean, it's, nobody's regulating them, so they could just do whatever they want." I understand that, but I think it's gone beyond
Yeah.
that in our society today.
Yeah.
I think it's dangerous when you see private companies that are so large
Yeah.
and have such a reach. When you see them teaming up with government,
Mhm.
that's a big problem
Yeah.
because then you're shutting out the voices of the little people,
Yeah. And
which that's what Americans are, right?
yeah.
95% of Americans are the little people.
Yeah.
Big tech, it's an oligarchy. It's a very
Yeah.
small number of people that control big tech.
Yeah. It's and I should clarify, I think they need to be regulated. I think we need to go Teddy Roosevelt on them and break them up. I think what they're doing is infringing free speech, and they're laying the groundwork for a CCP-esque technocratic communist dystopia. Let me put that out there. The reason why, just if I may, but the reason why I say, like, I'll play devil's advocate and I'll try to defend them is because whenever I like Trump, you like Trump. We're both right leaning. We both think big tech is bad. We both think the election was stolen. For me, it's like if we're gonna get together and like we're not gonna really challenge each other. So for me, it's like when I see my two liberal friends just kind of patting each other on the back. They're
Right.
like, "Orange man bad, white people Nazis," and it's like, do you
Right.
guys have any outside like stimuli? So let me just say, I agree with you entirely. What they're doing is disgusting. They are in bed with the government, and it's an NSA wet dream. You only have 5 billionaires that you got to control, and then they control their 5 platforms. I mean, from a top-down perspective, this is they have it exactly how they want it. Just the only reason I'm playing devil's advocate is so that there's at least some sort of like worthwhile debate, because otherwise it's just you and me
No,
patting
of
each other on the
course.
back. So
N
yeah, I agree with you. Just for the record, I agree with you.
Yeah. No, of course, and that's the way it should be, right? So,
Yeah,
somebody should say something that they believe or they think or they feel, and then if somebody doesn't agree with that, they should be able to say, "Well, you know what? I am not sure about that, and here's why."
yeah.
We're not seeing that anymore today.
And that's exactly, and therein lies the danger.
Of
Is
course.
you can't
I mean,
even you can't e
very dangerous.
it's just a blanket, right? I've been perma-banned from Reddit. I'd been on Reddit since, like, 2011, and I made a bunch of accounts. I got IP address banned, which I didn't know was possible. But
Oh,
I've
goodness.
been scrubbed from Reddit. I've been Alex Jonesed. So what they're doing is right. There's a dangerous precedent, because when we bring up
Yes.
things like, this is dangerous because now you're suppressing speech, and if you can suppress speech with, let's just say, you get rid of Alex Jones, we're just getting rid of Alex Jones. Well, then you get rid of Milo Yiannopoulos, and then ding, 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 and next thing you know, hey, they just removed the sitting president. Right
Right.
now, we're seeing you can't talk about election fraud. Well, well, we shouldn't be talking about that because that's hate speech. Well, I mean, come on, how many more months or years, and before all of a sudden you're going, why did I get banned for talking about the concentration camps of Uyghur Muslims in mainland China? Ba boom,
Right.
ba boom, ba boom. Next thing you know, you can't say something negative about the press secretary, and it's that's what's dangerous. But the more dangerous thing is when you bring up this argument to people, it's just shut up, fascist, shut up, Nazi.
Right.
A straight white male talking in front of an American flag, shut up, you're white
Right.
privilege. And it's like, replace the word white with black or Jew and then repeat that, you know,
Right.
shut up, Jew. And it's like, Jesus Christ, right?
No,
It's
the hypocrisy
it's
is
insane.
fascinating.
It is
It's
mind.
fascinating,
Yeah, it would be
but it's
comical if it wasn't so evil.
right, but that's right. So it's very Orwellian,
Yeah,
right? It's and I don't know if you read the book
I
1984,
did. Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, it's right out of a page of the book, right?
so
They literally want to say what I saw before my eyes,
the party's
I
final order.
I was told was not the truth,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah, the party's final. Sorry, and if you can't tell, you got to throw your elbows. I interrupt a lot. I'm trying to get better at
it's all
it. I
good.
get excited. I
It's all
get
good.
passionate. Yeah, the party's final order was to disobey your eyes and your ears. It was their final and most important order.
That's right.
That's what I keep going back to. I'm like, even
That's
now.
right.
So it's March 2nd. It's been almost what? No, December, January, February. It's almost been 4 months since the election. No,
Right.
November, December, January. 4 months. Wow.
Yeah, you're right.
Um, it's I find myself starting to go. I'm like, maybe Biden did just win. And it's because even in my own mind, I try to always, I'm like devil's advocate. I don't want to get pigeonholed into one belief system. But then I'll be like, wait. I watched it. I watched it pause. I
Right.
watched it go the other way. But it's,
Right.
yes, don't believe what your eyes and ears are telling you.
That's right. And I did a show right after the election. It was probably, in fact, I remember I recorded it on November 7th, which was the Saturday after election day. I remember that because in my video, I was saying, you know, I was trying to explain to my viewers, nobody has won yet, right? And it was like right when the mainstream media decided to say Biden won.
The AP has called it for President Biden.
Right. So, and I went on in the video to explain, but there's nothing in our constitution that says that mainstream media or any media gets to decide who our presidents are, right? And I actually go through the provisions of the constitution that are applicable there. That's not how we determine who wins a presidential election. It's not the AP. Now, for decades, has the AP quote unquote called an election on election night? Yes, they have. But that's not the law. That doesn't mean that the AP is right. I mean, again, I don't know if you're old enough to remember in 2000, Bush versus Gore,
I vaguely remember.
everybody, well, you know, the AP was calling Gore the winner for like 30 to 40 days after the election. And it turned out that, you know, he didn't win. I mean, it ended up being a court case, but he didn't win in the end. And it was, you know, kind of embarrassing for them to have to retract that. But this time around, they didn't retract it. They ran with it. And so did all the other social media outlets, all the other mainstream media outlets. I mean, if you remember, anytime you went on YouTube or Instagram or Facebook or anything for weeks after the election,
Yeah.
under anything that I posted, there was this insert that they put on
The
my
AP has called.
videos.
Yeah. The AP has called the election for
That's right.
President-elect Joe Biden. And it was
That's
like,
right.
What? I did a episode I did an episode with, um, Larry Holcomb. He was an author. I love conspiracies, and he wrote a book called Presidents and UFOs, and it's just all about declassified stuff from but I always put the author I always put the name of the book in parentheses. So, episode whatever, 211, Larry Holcomb, Presidents and UFOs. Banner. The AP has called it for President-elect Joe Biden. People are like, "Why am I watching a
Right.
video about President Roosevelt's documents on flying saucers? Why
Right.
is YouTube trying to say, by the way, President-elect?" It's like, all right, dude, like, chill.
Absolutely. They were slapping it on everything.
Rabid.
And now you can't talk about it. I don't know if you got a chance to see Mike Lindell's, he did a 2-hour documentary.
I haven't watched it yet.
Okay.
I know I need to.
Yeah, you should watch it. It's very it's very good. It's very, you know, well done. He interviews people that are, you know, involved directly with the election and, you know, fraud and cheating and stuff. So it's very good, but that he put that up on February 5th. He posted it on his YouTube channel. It came down almost immediately. I
Yeah.
mean, almost immediately. I mean, several thousand people saw it before they pulled it down. Thankfully, he has his own website, so he then also posted it on his website, which is where I saw it, and where you can still see it today. But it's really, really scary that the government is, again, in cahoots with these big tech companies, and they are trying to tell everybody, not just Americans, people around the world,
Mhm.
"Yeah, you know what? You shouldn't watch that because we don't think it's true."
It's not, yeah,
What is going on here?
it's dangerous for your little mind.
I mean, but I can't even get my head around it. The government is trying to tell us through the arm of their, I mean, really, I think social media and mainstream media has become, a political PR firm
It
for,
absolutely has.
right, for the left.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, really, who are you to tell us what to say, what to think, what to hear, what to watch, what to read?
Yeah, I mean, do you remember, I mean, everyone remembers, like, the bakery, right? The gay bakery, and you can't deny service. It's not a private company, apparently, you can't deny service based on okay, I'll take that argument, sure, let's try to move forward. I'm not gay, but you know what? I have gay friends, and sure, alright, whatever, let's make it so you have to sell a cake. That's okay, but that has to be applied to everyone, like,
Right.
that in every company. And do you remember, I think it was 2017, do you remember the pearl clutching insanity of net neutrality? If you were ever on Reddit, anyone that was on Reddit can remember, it was pinned at the top of every single, I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of subreddits, basically like pages within Reddit, bowling, skiing, the Red Sox, whatever, at pins at the top of every single one. So it's the only way you can do that is like from the CEO. Like that, it's just the probability of everyone. Because if you're in charge of a subreddit, a little less. If you're in charge of a subreddit, you can pin whatever you want. So let's say I had a podcast subreddit, I could pin this interview because it'd be like, hey, this is today's episode. Pinned at the top of every single subreddit was something about net neutrality. Sign this petition. You don't want private companies to be able to throttle your access to information based on their leanings. But
Interesting.
but Trump was in office. At the time, I took the stance of the private companies and they can. So maybe this is just I'm getting my own karma. But now when it's social media platforms, it's shut up Nazi, they're a private company. And it's like,
Right.
which one is it? Can they throttle our access to information? And if that's the case, that's fine, but they can't be protected by Section 230. And
Right.
it's the meme, I've jumped back and forth on the political. I've brought this up on the podcast before. I'm not one. I voted for Obama when I was 18. I was young and dumb. I voted for Romney in 2012 because I was pre-med and I didn't want Obamacare. I voted for Bernie in the primaries in 2016 because it was 2 years after I lost a brother to suicide. And I was like, I want free healthcare for everyone. I voted for Trump in 2020 because I was like, I think but the point is I'm not like a lockstep I guess, I don't know, one road belief system. But I mean, I remember the joke to say all that. I remember like the joke we'd make in like 2014, everyone freaking out about or whenever it was 2015, everyone freaking out about gay marriage being federally legalized. And it was, I mean, the running joke was like, if you don't want a gay marriage, just don't get one. It was like everyone that's like, men are marrying. It's like, if you're not gay, don't get one. No one's forcing you to. And it was kind of this
Right.
like stupid boomer, shut up. If you don't want one, don't get one. If you don't like, pot's decriminalized. If you don't like it, don't smoke it. And it was like, it was this whole, if you don't agree with it, just don't do it. It's fine. But now, if you don't like Mike Lindell's video, don't watch it. If you
Right.
don't like President Trump, don't follow him. But
Right.
it's not that way anymore. So it's net neutrality. Private companies can't throttle your access to information unless it's against conservatives. Okay. Bakeries, you have to serve everyone unless you're a social media platform and we don't like what you're saying. Don't get
Right.
a gay marriage if you don't want one. Don't watch. Well, no, actually, no. You can't watch President Trump. He's hateful. He's coordinated hate speech. I mean, sorry, I know I'm getting revved up, but
No, that's exactly what's going on. It's
it's
exactly what's going on. And the hypocrisy is so outstanding. And I don't know if people that like to call themselves woke, they like to call themselves, progressive. I don't know if they look at what's going on and see that hypocrisy and understand that it's just it doesn't make logical sense. You can't have it's, can't have two sides to the same coin. I mean, it what one, we can't do the, rules for thee and not for me. One law needs to be applied equally across the board. It can't really matter what your political affiliation is. It can't really matter who you voted for or didn't vote for or whether you voted at all, right? It really needs to be, these are the laws. We've got to enforce them equally. And that's, with the whole this whole thing of, free speech and censorship and everything, it's a complete violation of our constitution.
Mhm.
And I think a big problem in this country is that they don't even teach civics anymore in the schools. Nobody is teaching the constitution to the children, no matter what age. I mean, unless you're in law school, then, con law is a required course in your first year. But other than that, I mean, at least it better be. It was when I went to law school. But other than that, what happened to the civics classes in this country? Why aren't people putting that into the curriculum? Why'd they take it out in the first place? You know, many schools don't even say the Pledge of Allegiance anymore. Many schools.
It's
That to me is horrific.
Oh, I mean, anyone that thinks that there isn't a decades-long communist conspiracy is, I'm sorry, but your head's in the sand. And like I say that because I have on members of the CIA, former members of the CIA. The CIA Special Activities Division, which was created under Eisenhower, the True Life Black Ops. I've had on former members of there. They CIA Special Activities Division recruits from Delta Force and SEAL Team 6. It is the tip of the spear that people don't know exists. The guys I've had on can't legally acknowledge on camera they were part of it. It's part of their NDA. I've had them on, and
Wow.
whenever I bring up about, communist China, working with our media companies to sow dissent and or to crush dissent and to sow strife, they laugh and they're like, they are doing that, and they're like, because we do it. They're like, I know for a fact that this is happening because I used to do that. They're like, I used
Wow.
to, they talk. I mean, I remember going up to like a radio station, somewhere in Kabul. I mean, you literally give them you have a bag of cash and you have a gun, and it's like, hey, whichever one you want me to use, I'm gonna use. But hey, you're gonna start pushing this American message.
Wow.
It's so, and that's a whole nother philosophical discussion for another time. Is that okay or not? But we do that. So if you don't think that's happening here, I'm sorry, but you're brain dead. It's
I think one, in my opinion, I think one of the other issues that has gotten us into this mess is that um, Americans aren't as worldly. We're typically raised to study yes, our country, our culture, our history. We don't really, I mean, yes, we study, we learn about World War I and World War II, and we do study those things, but we're not taught, I don't think, to look at other countries and other cultures on an ongoing basis, right? So I have friends in Europe and family in Europe, and they'll know everything that's going on. Not everything, but they'll know a lot about what's going on in our country. And I really can't say that I know what's going on in their country because it doesn't affect my daily life. It's not something that is in our, newspapers or social media or on our televisions or, once in a while, yes. But is it a daily thing? Absolutely not. Right. So I think that's a problem because if we did look outside our country and we saw, especially the people that I'm going to call, closed minded, if you see what has happened in these other countries, whether it's happening today or whether it happened 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, that's how we learn. I
mhm,
mean, we have to learn from the past and not just our past. You have to look at other countries and what their past looks like because that's how you learn to not make the same mistakes,
mhm. Yeah, and
right?
I mean, it's like beating a dead horse, but it's like, man, what's like the first thing you do is like you disarm a populace. That's the very first thing you do is you disarm a populace, you make a faux enemy, and then you can steamroll whatever you'd like. And I mean, the very first thing you need to do, I mean, Che Guevara was actually called. I remember, I think it was Khrushchev told Castro to reel in Che Guevara because, quote, he's too radical. So when the communists are literally saying he's too nuts, but what Che Guevara was saying in Cuba was saying you cannot have a free press and also have a communist revolution. You cannot have open discourse. And I mean, there it is. you cannot have a free press. You cannot let it flow because the flowing of ideas is what dissolves any uh, overarching power structure. And
Right.
what I always point out to, I have, several left leaning friends that I have on the podcast just to sort of, challenge me because otherwise it's my opinion is the law. And that's not, I like to be made a fool. I like to get red in the face and be like, oh shit, I'm an
You don't
idiot.
wanna hear an echo chamber all the time
Exactly.
and,
I love my buddy Ernie, born in Mexico, worked in the Obama administration. I mean, his like comes on, and I love, I'm like, I kind of have to hang my head because I'm like, I'm a moron. Like, I like that. I like to be kind of like, I don't know, called out. Point is, or my buddy Roger, who's like one of my favorite sci-fi author. I've just become friends with him. He's been on the podcast a million times. He's a left-leaning guy. And we always talk, and it's always just a very moderate discussion about, I mean, truly just agreeing to disagree. He's not a dirty communist. I'm not a Nazi. It's just, hey, you vote Democrat, I vote Republican, whatever. The point of me saying all this is I always point out, I'm like, hey, right now, you got to censor Alex Jones, and then you got to censor Milo, and then you got to censor Trump. And now my first brush is I'm suspended from YouTube for a week. I tell them, I'm like, hey, once once all of the me's are gone, and then they go one step closer and get rid of the even less conservatives, eventually you guys, Ernie, Roger, you guys are going to be the far right because you don't think, Ernie will be like, he'll be liberal, but then he'll be like, I think the US military is the greatest thing in the world. He's like, capitalism is a vehicle for a total like wealth expansion. Eventually that's going to be the far right. When
Mhm.
Roger's like, yeah, I vote for, Medicaid for all, but no, I don't think we should be cutting off our 4-year-olds' genitals because they identify as a woman. Eventually, that's going to be hate speech. That's going to be, hey, Tommy or Miss Cox, say it's circulating misinformation about glitches affecting the outcome of the 2020 election. You're going to be getting that email, and it's going to be the year. It's going to be 2026. You're going to be getting that email. You have been insinuating that we should not be chopping off children's testicles, and it's like, what? And then when you turn, it's just going to be everyone before you that's been censored, just kind of like, come join the party,
It's but you know what? I think a lot of people don't think it'll get to that point.
and that's the
So
danger.
I think when you say that to somebody, they're like, "No, Tommy, you're exaggerating. It's never gonna get like that." Because, when I talk to people about the the difference between communism, socialism, and capitalism, and I say, I've spoken to people that grew up in socialist countries or communist countries, and they described to me instances where, their uncle was taken away and jailed for a year because he said something against the government. They look at me, they're like, "Ah, it'll never get like that here. That's over there. That's those crazy countries." And I'm like, "Okay, well, you know what? How do you think it started
Yeah,
over there?"
you think it starts. It doesn't start with, all right, anyone who speaks out's going to jail. It's a very slow,
Yes.
slow process. It's
Yes,
like,
they slowly infringe on the rights of the citizens until the point where it's you really don't have any more rights. And if you say something that the government doesn't like, they are going to throw you in jail for a year.
mhm.
It's I read an article about a a reporter. I don't know, I'm not sure if he was a reporter. I think maybe he was a reporter, but he did it through memes. Like he was, always posting memes to express his.
Yeah, that was your video about, and he got arrested.
Yes, in Florida, and they recently the Biden Department of Justice was going after him. They were doing their, homework and their research and their whatever, and they said, "Well, you know what? We have enough evidence. We're going to arrest him." They arrested him for, and this was for the 2016 presidential election, and they arrested him for saying that, his memes, because Tucker Carlson did a whole
Mhm.
story on it in one of his shows. Maybe it was last month, and yeah, they said, his memes were deterring people from voting for Hillary or something like this. I don't remember the exact allegations and charges, but come on, I mean that is exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, that is, people think, "Oh, it'll be years before it gets it'll never get that bad." It's here.
It's
It's here already. I
don't
mean,
forget the 2012 National Defense Authorization Act passed in December of 2011, I believe. Yeah, December 2011. 2012 NDAA, look it up, anybody listening, the National Defense Authorization Act, which contained the ability for the US government to detain indefinitely any US citizen under no charges, and they do not have to notify your family. So the whole disappearing citizen, it's 9 years old. It's not tomorrow. It's almost a decade old. And then you may be wondering, well, how come I haven't heard about that? Oh, I wonder how you'd keep that quiet. Maybe censorship. Oh, that's not good. Yeah, and it's the Vice is closing. It's not closed yet, but the Vice is closing.
that's right.
It's
That's right.
it's
And people that's, I call the name of my channel is All Things Lawyer because I talk about legal issues and I do some analysis on just everyday hot topics from a legal standpoint. But my motto that I always say in my shows is
knowledge is
knowledge is
power.
power,
Yeah.
right? Because just like you just said, people don't a lot of people, including me, don't even know what our government's up to because if the media is not publicizing what they're doing and the government isn't publicizing what they're doing, how are we supposed to know? I mean, how are we supposed to know unless I guess you spend every day all day reading through proposed legislation, but I mean that would be impossible if you're if you're doing it at the local level, the state level and the federal level.
Well,
That's what the media is supposed to be doing.
well, you know what? There is some crazy guys do it, like Alex Jones. So what do you do when someone does put it? And I'm not even defending it as I'm sitting here wearing an Alex Jones hoodie, but like but I'm not even. Yeah, I mean the guy's crazy. He's entertaining. He's crazy. Whatever. That's neither here nor there. But what happens when someone does put in the work, the leg work? What happens when a Milo Yiannopoulos does do that?
Right.
Well, then you just ban them.
That's right.
You just ban them outright. I mean, if that doesn't send chills up and down your spine to anyone, I mean, it's because you said it in one of your videos, and if one of the Delta Force guys I've had on said the same thing. If you can control what information someone receives, or either by pushing it, this is stunning and brave. Look at this 5-year-old boy stripper, stunning and brave, so progressive. And then if you shut down this, hey, here's 1,000 affidavits about election fraud, so now you're altering the information that they receive. And then
That's
again,
right.
through your video, when you have autofill suggestions, it's you can get whatever you want, right? You say Hillary Clinton, and Google will say, Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton. You go to like DuckDuckGo, say Hillary Clinton body count, right? You go to any other thing, but it's like, right? It gets insane. But when you're altering information through autofill, through suggestions, and then outright limiting what they can get, you are altering the information you have to act upon. And
Right.
then when you censor those around you who do speak up, right? I put up a video about election fraud, and now it's wham, and I have 2,000 subscribers on YouTube. That's still too tiny for anyone to really notice, right? You're not doing it to a Joe Rogan.
Right.
It's still too tiny to notice, and other people who see that might go, oh shit, I better shut up. Well, now you're directly affecting what's the final goal, is self-censorship. So now they are changing the way you act in the world. And all throughout human history, to do that, it took a gun to the back of your head. That was old school. They've stepped up their game now. Now, instead of having to have soldiers at every factory in the Soviet Union, if you don't show up to work, you get shot. Now it's very different. We just censor you. We remove you from the world. Okay, well, if you don't like it, go build your own Twitter. Okay, they did it. Okay, Amazon Web Services, Apple, and Google all coordinated to shut it down. All right. Well, you know what? These are still private companies. You don't have to use them. I don't know. I'd argue during a pandemic that whether they want to or not, they've become the public square, and now they are public services because we truly were not allowed to go out and talk. And that's what
That's
I've been
right.
saying since COVID started. As I said, what are they doing? They're shutting down the metaphorical and literal coffee shops where like revolutions are fomented. Now everything you access has to be through a screen, and when it's all through a screen, you can only go on a couple platforms. That's the end game because now we got you by the balls. We can shut down anything you say, and it has to go through here. And if you walk outside and talk in person, you're a Nazi and you're killing my grandma.
It's
Sorry,
it's
sorry for
yeah.
that.
No, it's it's the way it's going. And I wasn't 100% sure, but I heard Governor Kristi Noem speaking when she did the CPAC talk over the weekend. She said, which I think is correct, that South Dakota, which that's her state, was the only state in the nation that didn't shut down. And it was the only state in the nation that didn't require masks. She wasn't doling out these, gubernatorial, like, she just said, okay, here's the information we have. I'm not going to be a dictator here. Take the information I'm giving you and decide what's best for you, what's best for your family. They didn't shutter businesses. They didn't make people stay home. They didn't make people wear masks. And I understand from, what she's saying, that South Dakota ended up having per capita the lowest numbers on their death rate. I just, she said they were warned, the experts were warning me, Fauci warned me I would have 10,000, sick people a day flooding our hospitals. And she said, on our worst day, it was about 600 or so
Mm-hmm.
in the hospital. So it was really, and at the time, what was the media doing? What were the other, the governors in the blue states doing? They're criticizing her.
Mm-hmm.
They're calling her reckless. They're calling her, misinformed, and she's going to kill people. And look how it ended up,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Look how it ended up.
COVID is a perfect exhibit of, maybe people don't like my analogy of it starts with Alex Jones, then it goes to Milo Yiannopoulos, and then President Trump. All right, let's use a different one. 14 days to flatten the curve. Just
Right.
14. It's just 14, you dirty Nazi. What was that? It's just 14 days to flatten the curve. To now, it's, vaccination if you want to get on a plane, to actual COVID camps in Canada. It's slowly starting. I mean, how do you think it begins? It begins
Well,
like this.
yeah, and you know what? New York actually has proposed legislation. Representative Perry from the New York City area proposed legislation that says that New York State the government could detain anybody that either has COVID or is suspected of having COVID and put them into these COVID camps.
I mean, God, I hope they at least give us some badass Stars of David to stitch onto our shirts. I mean,
I mean, unbelievable. Now, when I read that, I was furious, obviously. So I started reaching out to a lot of members of the New York State legislature to say, are you guys kidding? I mean, what is your position on this bill? What I heard back from a good number of the legislators was that nobody was really getting behind that bill. It only had the original sponsor of the bill. Nobody was picking it up. It was only in one chamber. It wasn't in both chambers of the legislature, and that it had been introduced before because we've had public health emergencies before. But you know, I just said, I mean, the fact that somebody could even propose that
just dip their toes in
is,
the water. Just dip your toes in. Let's see how they respond.
oh my gosh, I was really upset that this is, this is kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back for me with on the for politicians,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I started to do a little digging. Once Congress passed, it was the December 28th, I believe, Congress passed the COVID relief bill, as they called it, which really was not about COVID relief.
That was money laundering to other nations, but
Oh my goodness. When I got my, wits about me and I went through the legislation and I saw what they were doing with our tax dollars,
Pakistani gender studies.
I did a show on it. I was like, I can't believe, where is the outrage from the American people? That's the problem I was having. The politicians prove themselves to be,
They're whores.
crooked.
They're whores. They've been since day one, and okay.
I mean, crooked, criminal. I want to call them criminal. Where's the outrage from the American people? Where is everybody standing up saying, are you guys kidding? That's what you want to do with our tax dollars?
Well, where can you get that information? Is it censored by big tech?
That's right.
And now you see where it becomes, it's not just, it may work for you now, moderate Democrat who may be listening. It may be in your court now. Yeah, shut up the Nazis, get rid of Trump. All right. Hey, we're all tempted by, as long as my guy wins. What happens when it comes back to you? What happens when you want to speak up about, hey, you know what? I've been out of work for 11 months and, I have a 2-year-old daughter and another one on the way. I don't think we should be sending money to Pakistani gender studies. And I certainly don't think I should be thrown into camp because I have COVID. But I don't like, it doesn't matter. You are now, shut up, Nazi.
Well, and it's also, big tech wouldn't, report on it or allow it to be spread, but neither did the mainstream media. All they
Mm-hmm.
focused on was, oh, how much money are the Americans going to get in their check? Oh, it's only going to be 600. Everybody thought 1,200. Trump wanted 5,000. They focus on the wrong thing and they do it on purpose
Yeah, it's
so
by
that
design.
people miss the point of what's behind that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if they're making such a big deal about the checks going out to Americans versus where billion it was a 900 billion with a B, 900 billion-dollar spending bill. Billions went overseas. Not a couple thousand, not a couple 100,000, not a couple million, billions, billions. Okay. And I want to ask if you know how much money we have in the kitty right now, because they're sending billions of dollars overseas. If any of your viewers, just take a second and think, how much money do you think the federal government has in
Well,
their
well,
savings account?
well, I know,
Right.
right? The last time I checked, it's 27 trillion in debt.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have not $1.
Oh,
We
yeah.
have not $1, and they decide to send billions overseas. So what does that mean? So that means they're either going to print more money, which then continues
Yes.
to destroy our dollar, or they're going to borrow it. And where do you think they're going to borrow it from? China. So we get to pay back all of that money plus interest, which means our kids are going to be paying it back and their kids are going to be paying it back. I mean, these politicians have to think that we're stupid. They
Mm-hmm.
really do.
Mm-hmm.
And they're getting away with it because nobody's blowing the whistle on them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's infuriating. I had on an author the other week, Michael Swanson, author of The War State. And it's a really good book about the military industrial complex from like Eisenhower through, I don't know, maybe like actually kind of ended around like this. It was like a 20-year gap book. But there's this idea, and he and I talked about it on the podcast, to where I remember reading a quote somewhere. I don't remember who it was, but it was, if I owe you $1 million, I'm screwed. If I owe you $1 billion, you're screwed, because now you got to hope to get that money from me.
Yeah. Huh.
Part of me thinks about us having like a military that's 11 times or larger than the next 11 militaries combined. Part of me can't help but think, man, is the debt, this is just kind of a side tangent, is the debt not like the ultimate weapon? Because it's like, how's China going to roll up and collect it? Like, you and what army? We have a $27 trillion army. Like, how are you going to collect the money when we've spent all the money on a military that makes it so no one can bully us around? But that's kind of another side tangent for another time. I realized, I was like, wait, why am I going down this rabbit hole right now? But the point is it's back to media censorship. Is It's very dangerous, because
Extremely.
what happens when you try to raise the flag? Well, now you get censored, and by the time you start to realize how bad it is, it's too late. Now, I'm only 30 years old, and I try to look at things as like, I'm sure at any point in any country in history over the millennia and on every continent, I try to keep some perspective. I'm sure you and I could go to 1100s Norway, and we'd probably be talking about how corrupt the system is and it's all screwed. And it's almost like, okay, it seems like there's a somewhat constant, right? The world's always on fire. Like, it's always going to hell. But I try to look at the positive sides of like, how can we, what, what are the ways out of this? And I've had, a lot of people say that I'm too optimistic, and that's a fault. To which I counter, after I lost a sibling to suicide, I really did find that like I had to stay positive. That's the only way I think I'm still alive, is staying optimistic. So that doesn't mean don't be based on reality, but try to stay optimistic. So I try to look at it. So I say all that to say, how can we get out of this? Is this a phase right now? It's just like the oil companies that Roosevelt had to break up. Are we in a phase right now? And are we going to look back at this no different than the flower children of the 60s or the crack pandemic of the 80s or whatever? Or are we just
Right.
in a weird, is this just remember growing up? Yeah, remember the whole the weird the social media. Oh, it was a weird, man. You couldn't. Or are we going down into quicksand where we can't get out?
It's such a great question because so many people are asking that question. And I see a lot of the comments on my channel. Rumble is really where I put my focus and my energy because YouTube is censoring like crazy. But um, you know, I think people it's kind of split. People are discouraged because of, what's going on, what happened with the election, um, kind of throwing their hands up in the air saying, "Oh gosh, we are in huge trouble here." And then there are other people that are saying, "No, we have got to stand up and fight. We have got to push back. We have got to, so and I really do think it is a fight. I think it is a information war, to be quite honest with you, because when people aren't told the correct information, whether it's they're not told the whole story or they're told a skewed version of the story, or they're just not allowed to hear any of the story, they start to think a certain way, which then triggers them to act a certain way,
Mhm.
right? So, an example that I was talking about with somebody recently is, the whole Google manipulation thing. I have a friend that was, she's in her 50s. She's not really tech savvy. She would just go on her phone and just look things up on her phone. Now, the phone is defaulted to use Google, right? Which I think all phones are. I think that was part of the lawsuit that um, the DOJ sued Google over the summer. And I have not checked the status of that lawsuit, but it was for antitrust violations. And I think one of the things was because Google made it so that you can't even delete them off phones or something crazy
Mhm.
like that.
Yeah.
So, um, she kept using Google and to do searches and do searches. And we were discussing a person, and she decided to Google the person. And, of course, the top of the results was like Wikipedia's version of what this person does and is and who they are and their background. And she read it to me and I said, "Oh my gosh." I said, "That's pure propaganda." I said, "What are you reading?" And she said, "Wikipedia." And I said, "What's your search engine?" And she said, "Google." I said, "Would you stop using that thing?" I said, "Google is terrible." I said, yippee.com, it's yippy.com is the one that I use. If you put your search term into yippee.com and take the same exact search term and put it into Google, you will get very different results.
Yeah.
I mean, very different results. And you prefaced earlier, you mentioned DuckDuckGo. Now, I used to use them. The problem I heard was that you don't realize it, but
They
some search engines
they
use
use
the
Google.
Google results
Yeah.
instead of producing their own results.
Yeah.
So, because it's just cheaper that way and Google's
Yeah.
so big and they've been doing it forever. So, but if you do that, so if you're using DuckDuckGo and you think you're not using Google, you might be using Google and not even realize it.
Yeah, I kinda threw that out there as, like, a general name. When I say I meant kinda just alternative search engine, Bing, Yippee, DuckDuckGo.
Yeah.
It's yeah, and I would say don't even just use Yippee, like, you use Yippee and Google. Examine your result and go
Right.
because, let's play devil's advocate. If I say Google's all propaganda, well, what if it's not all propaganda? How do you not know that's just a pro-Trump talking point? So it's like use both and just, you know, look at the results. But it's yeah, and you're not supposed to question it, and it's just this is the facts, trust the science, shut up Nazi. And it's like, man, this is not a good path to go down, but I tend to lean on the optimistic side and not complacent optimism. It's gonna get better. It's just sit back, it'll get better. That's not good. still
Right,
fight
right.
and still get out information and fight these dictators, but I also like to remain optimistic because just like when the law was written in 1996, no one foresaw Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. What are we not foreseeing next? Maybe we'll look back at this podcast in 20 years and be like, "Oh man, they were all so wound up. They had no idea that whatever was going to be a thing and it completely destroyed, social media the same way that Netflix destroyed Blockbuster." I don't know what that will be. It's
Right.
My favorite idea is that Elon Musk's Starlink, his satellite internet, is he's just not going to let social media be allowed on.
Oh,
So
that would be nice.
now it's
That'd
gonna
be
be
great.
okay if you censor. Well, then now you can't use my global internet, and he'll just make it free for everyone. And so all of a sudden you got to play that game. But I don't know. I try to be optimistic in that it's. I do think something else is going to come along. It seems like this is the natural course of things. It
But I think that I mean, like what you're saying, I think people have to do something,
Oh no,
right?
yeah, you have to do something. You can't be complacent.
Right. I don't think people can just say,
It'll
well, you
get
know what?
better.
Uh, it is what it is. That's the worst line. I can't stand it when people say it is what it is. No, it's not what it is, right? Because you're not really doing anything to make it what it is, right? So, I mean, I started to look around to see, what we could do because I'm a really big proponent of term limits for politicians.
Yeah.
Okay. There a lot people probably don't even know this, but a lot of politicians, those offices don't have term limits. I mean, everybody
Mm.
knows the president does. Okay. But does your governor? Not all governors have term limits. Does your city's mayor or superintendent, if you live in a town, I mean, take a look because a lot of places don't have term limits. So when you don't have term limits, I mean, we've got Nancy Pelosi in Congress since 1984.
Jesus Christ.
Okay. I mean,
That's
come on.
insane.
I mean,
That's and this isn't a Democrat or Republican thing, man. This is just, dude, no one should be there that long.
exactly.
It's
Exactly. Because I can rattle off some Republicans that have been there.
absolutely.
I mean, I did an interview with you should check it out. It's the Convention of States, a great
Yeah, I
organization.
watched that one. Yeah.
Okay. So in that interview, we were talking about term limits. I was interviewing the one of the directors of New York State for the Convention of States. And, we were talking about term limits and the importance thereof. And I said, let me just throw a fact on the screen about who's the longest serving politician in Congress. And it was 56 years.
Jesus.
Somebody served in Congress for 56 years. And then there were a ton who have served like over 40 years. I mean, it's not supposed to be a career. It's not supposed to be a career. If you think about it, our founding fathers, and somebody, a fellow constitutionalist pointed out to me recently in a conversation that, you know, the founding fathers didn't put the term limits into the Constitution because back then, if you think about it, there were no trains, there were no individual
Yeah.
cars.
Yeah.
To get to Washington, D.C., to conduct business of the government was a pain in the rear end.
It was
So
it was it was a life change. You had to go. That's what you did now.
and people had to, they had their farms. They
Yeah.
had to leave their farms. They had to travel for days to get to Washington, D.C. on horse. You know what I mean? They were not jumping in their, however many horsepower vehicles or trucks or whatever. There were no trains. So, it was a hardship for them to serve as a congressperson. So they didn't think that people would try and do it for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, right? They just figured, you know, they'll do it and then they'll step down and the next person comes up. Well, not today. I mean,
Mhm.
today it is, and I did a show on this because I couldn't believe, after they passed that COVID relief bill in December 2020, I said, I have to look more into these people. Who are these people? And I did a show on the benefits that Congress gives themselves. Of
Oh,
course, you and
yeah.
I, you and I pay for it. But people should check out that show because it'll boil your blood, the things that they do for themselves with our tax
Oh,
dollars.
yeah. Oh, yeah, no, it's I mean, aren't they the only Americans exempt from the PPACA, the Obamacare? They're the only Americans exempt.
So they wrote a law for America, for the citizens, Obamacare, we call it, and wrote themselves out of it. I mean, if that in itself doesn't tell people that the law is, for the pits, I mean, come
Yeah,
on.
yeah,
Come on.
and the
But they have an underground subway system
oh, yeah,
that goes from their parking area to the Capitol, and it takes like a minute,
yeah,
the subway to get from A to B. It takes like a minute. And people will say, "Wait a minute, why all that money to build it, all that money to maintain it? That only takes a minute. Can't they walk that?" They don't want to walk outside because they don't want constituents coming up to them and
yeah,
talking
it's
to them and
yeah,
asking them questions and challenging them.
yeah,
Right? I mean,
it's
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 like
it's yeah, when they're all locked away, when the White House is surrounded by 30,000 National Guard members, you gotta start to wonder, "Man, they really don't want anyone coming up there. I wonder why." It's yeah, it's like the quote, "Never trust a skinny chef," you know, because he's not testing his food. Man, I don't know. There's something about all these people in DC who just their own armed guards, their own subway systems, they're exempt from any law. They write their own laws that govern them, funded by us. Man, if that doesn't I don't know. It doesn't seem applicable to the rest of us. So, and I know I gotta let you go in a couple minutes because I gotta run. Is what are what are the steps that are being taken? Like, is there legislation to revoke Section 230? Is there what are the steps being taken? Like, let's be optimistic, but is there any evidence for being optimistic?
Well, so under President Trump, last summer he did issue executive order, which I did cover in that show that I do on
Mhm,
Section 230, where he was trying to start the ball rolling in having some sort of modification to Section 230. Um, I'm going to say it probably is completely stalled at this point. Now there's a new administration. They are very pro big tech. So I can't imagine that that's going to be on the forefront right now. Um, but I think that there are things that people can do that we kind of can work around that issue of, what is going on with Section 230. If the government's not going to regulate, what do we do? I think people don't understand the power that they have. Number one, with what social media they use. Um, you know, if they say 75 million, 80 million people voted for Trump, and those people stop using, you know, social media platforms that are biased, that are censoring, that are against free speech, that's going to have an impact on those social media companies. Who you use for your cell phone servicer, where you buy your groceries, where you buy your things, your clothes, your furniture. People love to use Amazon because they say, "Oh, it's so convenient, it's so easy." Okay, but isn't Amazon the one that's leading the charge, or one of the ones leading the charge against free speech? Do you really want to give your money to a company that's anti-free speech?
I
I mean,
can
think
prou
about that.
I can proudly say that I went from spending all of my podcast equipment from Amazon in 2020. I can happily say that I stopped on a dime the day they removed Parler from AWS. I
Right.
can proudly say that I have not spent a penny there since they did that,
Right.
and that's
Yeah,
what you have to
absolutely.
do. That's
But
what you
that's
have to do.
we don't just vote with our voices, we vote with our pocketbooks too. So, there are websites out there that promote, made in America,
Mhm,
that promote companies that produce their goods in America, that employ Americans. So if that's important to you, great. Find the website and use your money, spend it on those companies,
mhm.
give them your patronage. We can also, I mentioned the Convention of States. People should look that up. Their website is conventionofstates.com. It is a group. It's a grassroots organization. They've been going on for 5, 6, 7 years now. They are going state by state and trying to get the states to call a convention. And it's pursuant to Article 5 of the Constitution. And if all the states, or enough states, 34 states, have to agree on having this convention, and they would have to agree on what they would want to amend to the Constitution. But if that happens, we do have the power at the state level to impose term limits on Congress, because that's one of the things that Convention of States is looking to do. They also want to limit the spending of Congress, and they want to be able to limit the reach of Congress, meaning, what Congress can legislate, what type of things in our daily lives can Congress tell us to do or not do versus the state or the local. So I think it's a great organization. I think a lot of, big name conservatives are getting behind it. And they have chapters in every state. So volunteer, go on their websites. They have a petition, sign the petition. It just tells your state representatives that you want to have a convention of states. The more people that do that, I mean, let's be real. Politicians only respond to very large groups pushing them to do something, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they think they're not going to get reelected, they're going to listen,
Mm-hmm.
right? If it's one or two voices, they're not really going to care.
Mm-hmm.
So go on their website, sign the petition, support the movement. If you can volunteer, great, volunteer. They you can do phone calls, you can do email writing, you could do letter writing, you can reach out to the legislators in your state and try to convince them to get on board to have a convention. There's so many things you could do to volunteer and make a difference. Again, I had to go digging for that information, right? There's such suppression of information that you have to really be careful where you're getting your information, and a lot of times you have to dig for it.
Yeah.
So I think people, I think that's the whole reason I started my channel last year, was because I wanted people to have a place to have information that the mainstream media is never going to cover, or they're going to cover it in a very slanted light,
Mm-hmm.
or they're only going to cover part of the story. So that's the whole reason I started my channel, was
Mm-hmm.
because I couldn't stand the hypocrisy and the lack of information that was unbiased.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the end goal for me is start like my own website. Ultimately, it's like I think that's the ultimate place you have to go, is your own website. And
Yeah.
I don't think anything can be trusted. And then just kind of as like a side note, man, how smart were the founding fathers when they said everyone should be able to own guns? Like, I mean,
The
seriously.
Second
And
Amendment.
yeah, when you see everything going on right now, when you see censorship, when you see COVID camps, I mean, when you see the riots of last year, 2020, I mean, how much sense does it start to make you go, oh, I might not mind having a couple 30-round mags? When you start to see how on a knife's edge society is balanced.
Well, I mean, I always say this. Our founding fathers put in the First Amendment to the Constitution our freedom of speech, right? That is the cornerstone of any free society, is
Yeah,
that you can freely speak,
yeah.
right? You can exchange thoughts freely. And the Second
The
Amendment is they put the right to own arms,
the
right?
insurance program for the first.
So, well, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and freedom of religion is also, and assembly is also in the First Amendment, and that's also getting crushed. That's
COVID,
another
COVID,
show that we could talk about, but that's
absolutely.
also getting crushed.
No, you could say that COVID knocked out assembly and practicing religion, right?
Well,
And
COVID didn't, the government did,
well, but yeah, you get what
with
I'm
the excuse of COVID.
with the excuse of COVID. I mean,
Right.
it's all horseshit. But I mean, and they're coming after number one with big tech. Sooner or later, it's going to be hand in your gun, and at which point, I don't think there's any other thing but you have to fight. But hopefully, it won't come to that. And ironically enough, this whole episode, I mean, I can't upload again until Sunday. I don't think I can upload this episode on YouTube because we talked about election fraud.
Well, it's not just that. They're just going to take it down because you're talking about free speech.
Well,
You're
that's the thing,
talking,
and that's the
yeah.
thing is like you can see real time. Let's say Rumble and BitChute didn't exist. and that's my only platform, you can see how that would affect the way I act.
That's right.
Self-censorship, I would go, "Well, shit, I can't put up this episode."
That's right.
Thankfully for BitChute and Rumble, I can look at those and go, "Okay, I can." So now it'll just be they're just gonna start seeing on YouTube, it'll go from episode 378 to 380. It'll be like, "Hey, if you wanna go see 379, go look on Rumble and BitChute,"
That's right.
which, I mean, I do hope that the natural flood, I do have hope in that, that there will be a quote, almost like a brain drain from YouTube to, I think Joe Rogan, I think that was the first, whole leak in the dam when he left his Spotify. 'Cause
Yeah.
a lot of people don't know this, is it wasn't, yes, he got $100 million, but it wasn't just that. He was saying that he was getting messages, emails, or phone calls from executives at Google. Because early on, this about this time last year, he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna have on this like virologist or this pandemic doctor," and they were saying, "You can't have him on. You can't have him on. You can't." They were saying which doctors he could have on, and they said, "We're gonna pull your channel otherwise." And he
Oh,
said
yeah.
that's the first time he was like, "Holy shit!"
Yeah.
So hopefully that was the beginning of the flood, and I think we just have to keep hammering away because they wouldn't censor and they wouldn't manipulate information if they didn't have to. If they were truly in charge, like it's kind of like
Right.
if you have to say you're the king, then you're not the king. Like
Right.
raw power doesn't need to defend itself. It
Yep.
just is. The fact that they are censoring, that goes to show you the whole thing is a charade. The whole thing is a facade. Very, I'll give credit where credit's due. You have to respect your enemy. It's a very well woven tapestry of lies, and they have this facade of ultimate power, and they'll shadow ban you and censor you. But they wouldn't do that if they didn't have to. And I think what we're going to start to
Yeah.
realize is it's kind of like the mouse in front of the flashlight, and it looks like a monster on the wall.
Mhm.
So to keep fighting and keep doing it, but I
Absolutely.
would definitely love to have you back on.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
You
you.
know, I will end with this. What you're saying reminds me of, Game of Thrones, where, the line of when you cut out a man's tongue,
No,
you're not telling the world that he's a liar, right? You're telling the world you don't want them
yeah,
to hear what he has to say,
you just make the world curious as to what he had to say.
right?
It
So true. And
it's
that's the bottom line with censorship. If they're pulling stuff down, they're pulling down, your episodes. They've already so far taken down 3 of my shows. You know, it's just because they don't want the truth and opposition to their agenda getting out to people.
yeah.
That's
"Don't
the
don't
bottom
look at
line.
this. Don't look at this. You can't
Right.
look over here," and it's like,
That's
now
right.
now I kinda, it's, what got me to listen to Eminem in, like, 7th grade was, like, my parents saying, "Don't listen to Eminem."
Right,
I was like,
right.
"I didn't know who that is," but now actually, I think I was in 4th grade. They were like, "You can," my mom's like, "You cannot listen to him." And I was like, "Well, now I'm curious as to who Slim Shady
Exactly.
really is." I didn't care
Exactly.
before that, and then I was like,
Now I wanna listen to it because you told me
"Yeah,
not to.
yeah." And
Right.
I love Eminem, but, like, the whole, I think it exists though, when I put up an episode and it's 370 is banned, I mean, I get more people going to that than any other video on other websites because 'cause
That's interesting.
they're like,
See?
"What was banned?" They're like, "What was banned?" If I can have on every guest under the sun, but you can't listen to that one, well, man, it's too dangerous for you guys to listen to.
That's right. That's
So,
right.
yeah, and I also always recommend, I recommend that you don't go watch it, because it's it's dangerous. So, yeah, so, but
Good
I w
PR.
yeah, yeah, I'm like, "I don't know if you can handle this one, man. Are you sure?
Right.
You
You
better
can't
buckle
handle the
up. You
truth.
better you better have a couple shots of whiskey because I don't know if you
Right.
can." And then they go and watch it and they realize just how boring it is. And it's just they're like, "Why was this banned?" It's the Streisand effect. But let's wrap this one up. Thank you so much for coming on, your show.
Yes, thank you for
All
having me, Tommy. Great
your
talking
show,
to you.
All Things Lawyer. Yeah, you as well. Your show, All Things Lawyer. I'll put that in description. Sticky to the top. Well, I can't sticky in any comments until I'm back on YouTube. So it'll be up on Rumble and BitChute, and I'll link it. Yeah, go subscribe, go follow, go watch, and yeah, I'll text you and let's definitely do another episode because
Absolutely.
there's still a lot I'd like to talk about.
Absolutely. That's terrific.
All right, thank you so
Sounds
much.
good.
All right,
All right. Have a great day.
you as well. Thank you.
Okay.